And our subject today is the masculine and the feminine. Thought take a nice broad subject there, give us plenty to talk about. I wanted to say good morning, Lewis.
Good morning.
Let me remember my manners. How are you today?
Actually, doing really well. I'll share the same idea that I shared with another friend this morning. This is a new moon in Pisces,
Yeah, it's
and
the
it's
big planetary alignment.
7 planets in alignment from the perspective of Earth. A really good day, sort of connect with our highest dreams and have enough trust to allow ourselves to step into that with some confidence.
Yeah.
Even if we're a little bewildered, it's like, what are we doing again?
Yeah.
That's the energy, and it's it's really good to be here.
Yeah. In another day, another topic, I'd really lean into that. I like to think about the period of time before the alignments and after and so on. Not today.
Fair enough.
Not today.
Fair enough.
The masculine and the feminine. What is the first thing that comes to your mind?
The fact that they are part of a larger whole. The fact that we separate them out for purposes of quote unquote understanding, which from the ego perspective turns out to be more about control. And yet from the divine's perspective, like everything else, it's all part of the eternal flow. And the more we can understand that whatever our presenting gender is in this lifetime, we are eternally both. What I remember being told many years ago was that whatever gender you're presenting as, that was the energy you were being asked to sort of master and experience more completely. And part of that process is to bring it into balance with its opposite. Even though it's not really opposite, it's just another part of that yin yang symbol. That's the first thing that comes to mind. What about you?
Well, I'm going to follow that. Actually, I'm going to follow that because the container of the masculine and feminine. I want to go there, but you've reminded me of something. Before I went to university, and I was looking around universities to go to, and the one I ended up at was University of Sussex in Brighton, and I did psychology. Did you know this?
No.
I didn't know this. Yeah.
No, I figured you did go to college.
I've been to school and stuff. I can read and write. No, but there was this psychology degree I wanted to take. At the time, it was an arts-based psychology. I ended up in a science one, but because it was an open day, they had to sit down at computers and do, I think, what they called an androgyny test
Interesting.
to see what your masculine feminine balance was.
Right.
And mine came out as like 80% feminine.
Interesting.
Right. And the second time, because once I actually got to university, which was probably a year later, ended up doing the same test again, pretty much the same result. And it was funny because I think it's an arts degree, it's psychology. I think maybe there was one other man in the room. Probably charted the same. And I think the girl next to me was like 70% masculine. Hers came out, so we were shaking our heads. And the response that information got at the time, and even when I told people, I always noticed people would say, "Oh, that's good. That's good." And I'm like, "Why is that good? Why is that good?" It's like something on your body. It's like your elbow. It just is. It's not good. It's not bad. It just is. I look at how masculinity is presented these days, and maybe not go there. Because it's not gender, it's essence, right? Expressive essence. We're going to call it that. Can you?
Okay.
Have you got a better one?
You
Probably do.
It's almost about polarity,
right?
But I would encourage people to understand polarity different than perhaps we normally think of it. Usually you think of polar opposites as if there's just black, white, up, down, off, on. What if polarity was more about continuum?
Go on.
What if polarity was about different aspects of the whole, and we might express different aspects to a later or lesser degree in a given moment, but we always have access to everything. That's the way I think about masculine and feminine. I think of them as, you can think of them as salt and pepper,
Yeah.
and you're going to use them.
Yeah.
That's not really how it is it?
Yeah.
It really is just one spice.
Like a
And
lava lamp.
like, oh, there you go. That's a good. Oh my gosh, you are dating yourself, sir.
Oh,
Well,
God, has it gotten to that point?
okay, so segue has nothing to do with masculine and feminine. When I was little, my mom had a lava lamp on one of the counters.
A while
And
ago.
I can remember, thank you for that. I can remember sitting there and just peacefully, joyfully watching the globs of goo go up and down. And it was incredibly peaceful. It was almost like, even though I didn't understand the concept of meditation at the time, it was almost like a meditation, you know? Now, wouldn't it be cool if the way people perceive masculine and feminine was like that?
Mm.
Neither one was valued more than the other, and yet both were seen as important,
Yeah.
necessary, and very useful to sort of connect to any larger possibility. Imagine what the rhetoric would be if, instead of a patriarchal bias,
Yeah.
which we have
Yeah.
around the world right
Mhm.
now, just like in previous ages, it was the opposite direction. Talk about Aquarian synergy. My understanding is, as we enter this Aquarian frequency, as we enter the quote unquote new age, Aquarian energy is all about integration.
Yeah.
It's all about connecting the dots, so you see how all the parts and pieces connect to a larger whole, and then let you present something that you couldn't have presented otherwise. And I think
Yeah.
that's what happens both internally and between people in terms of masculine and feminine. So to get back to your earlier comment, your test shows up 80% feminine. Why is that good? There's an underlying understanding, and we'll get into this in terms of sort of parallels. You think about masculine, think about logic. Think about feminine, think about intuition.
Mm.
At the end of the day, which is going to take you further in terms of understanding what's real? It's going to be intuition. Now, logic is very useful. We are in the 3D world. We have our five senses, the logic, the ego, brain, very important piece of a larger dynamic. And yet, at the end of the day, and even at the beginning of the day, it's the connection to the heart.
Mhm.
It's the connection to that intuitive understanding, the ability to receive that guidance and then have the courage to act on it.
Right.
That's much
Right.
more of a heart dynamic. What do you think about that?
I love that you said both, and I've just got to drive that point home. It's not just about intuition; it's about having the courage to act on it. Got to be spelt out. When I think about balance, I think about, usually we aren't in balance. We're getting into it or coming out of it.
Right. That's
Right.
right.
And so the masculine feminine polarity, shall we say, or the
Mhm.
expressive essence, I really think for our human experience, I don't know that there's anything more important than that. To navigate, to be in command of our feminine expression, our masculine expression, to know when to use one, the other, to be able to step into one from the other, when to hold, when not to. I don't know that there's anything more important than that. If you think about what it entails, acting, receiving,
Mhm.
listening, speaking.
Not quite that simple from my vantage point. Again, you get into stereotypes, masculine, logic, structure, power, will, drive, the energy that moves forward. Feminine, yin, receptive, the moon. And yet, there's another part to the masculine and the feminine dynamic that people don't talk about too much.
Yeah.
And what I remember, because I read about this years ago, I believe it's the Hindu perspective. They talk about the divine feminine. They talk about Shakti. They talk about it being the real source of the energy that the masculine uses to do whatever it's going to do. If you think about it,
Yeah.
what is more important than the womb, both physically and metaphysically? Because if you don't have an origin point, if you don't have a window through which to come from wherever you were, wherever you're going to be, you're not doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
You're not growing, you're not developing.
Mm-hmm.
So in some ways, the divine feminine is incredibly important, more important than people realize. And I almost see the polarization on the other side as a reaction at the ego level in fear, almost like looking at the divine feminine, feeling the inherent power, and the male, insecure male at the ego level kind of goes, I don't know what to do with that. In fact,
Yes.
total segue, early Christian development in terms of the powers that be, when Christianity was becoming a thing, and there were people in political power that wanted to really sort of push their agenda forward. One of the things that one of the early councils did was cut out all the references to the divine feminine.
Right.
They didn't want
Right.
people thinking that women could be connected to the divine like Jesus was. That would be a bad thing.
Right.
So again, part of, I think, what we're all going to have the opportunity to do is connect to that feminine in ourselves and others, realize its amazing value, amazing beauty, and bring it into the world in a balanced way. Because
Yes.
it's not about one against the other. It's about and.
You said a lot there.
I did. I'm
You
sorry.
did. No.
I got excited.
There's just some big pieces there. So let me just weave this together. So if I'm talking about masculine and feminine, it's within that. It's within our daily active expressive capability to do so.
Okay.
You just went to divine feminine. So it's not that's like I'm talking about a tea coaster. You just went to the table here. You're as far as I understand, you're spot on. Everything from my training and so on, everything emanates from the divine feminine. My everything I've learned that resonates for me comes from that. And the divine masculine, which I think needs to enter this conversation now, is in service to that. And then we get to the tea coaster, right?
Yeah.
So I think if we're having these conversations, we've just got to delineate between what's in our human hands to work with on a daily basis, and then how we connect to divine masculine, divine feminine, and then how different are they?
Mm-hmm.
How different? If we go there, we use the D word, divine masculine, divine feminine. At that point, how are they distinct from each other?
Okay, I can give you a good analogy.
Sure.
Let's think about the traditional Christian Trinity.
Mhm.
Okay, so Father, Son, Holy Ghost, if you're coming from a Catholic perspective. Let's map that to what we're talking about. The Father is the divine masculine, divine will, divine power. The Son becomes the divine child, love, the offspring of the masculine and feminine.
Right.
Okay. The Holy Spirit becomes the divine feminine, becomes the wisdom. Now, here's the thing about the Holy Spirit. We just talked about in terms of the divine feminine being connected to sort of the eternal battery. When the Holy Spirit sort of makes its presence known among the apostles and the flames appear above the head, they are quickened by the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
That sure sounds like high energy to me.
Yeah.
So again, I think it's important to recognize that both those parts and pieces, the masculine and feminine, they're forever dancing together. And we separate them out in a triangle, again, for purposes of understanding and control. But the more we can understand that we're eternally connected to all three, we are the divine child, but we also connect to divine will and divine wisdom. We're both that which comes into being and that from which all comes.
You're expecting a reply now, aren't you? There isn't a reply to that sort of.
I'm sorry, I just went from the table to the warehouse.
I mean, you went high concept there, which is arguably the point.
What do you think? Well, let me just throw something out there. This is sort of something that I'm sure you and I have heard for years.
Yeah.
That men, at least traditionally, stereotypically, have trouble expressing their feelings. If you run with that idea, how does that sort of fall into the dance that we're talking about here?
Right. So this idea that men don't share feelings.
Yes, that's right.
Right. So
You never heard that, right?
never heard it. Never heard it. Men don't share feelings. So I don't think that's the problem.
Okay.
I think the problem is men share their feelings without words. And so we sit there exuding, right? And no matter who our partner is,
Right.
They watch us and think, what's going on? Just want to know what's going on with him. Why won't
And
he use words?
why don't men, going with the stereotype, why don't men actually say something,
Oh,
articulate something?
so I think it's two things. One is to articulate fear, concern conveys weakness, and weakness is basically death for us. Is one thing. I think the other is we don't know how to,
Okay.
and so all that I'd say female partner, all that they want from us is just know what's going on, so they know where they stand, so they know how to help, or whatever it is. So there seems to be this cyclical dynamic where he never shares his feelings, and men say, "Well, no one cares. No one cares how we feel, what we feel." He never shares his feelings. Well, no one cares, right? It goes round and round like that. And what I think would break that, and I think all it's not just men and women. It's really the more vocal partner and the less vocal partner. It's well
Which
beyond
could be in either gender.
any gender, right?
Right,
Any
right.
gender, right? Think let's maybe just talk because it's generally men, right? What I think men need is to have another person to work out their feelings in a safe way, right? To understand what they're actually feeling and then bring that information back to their partner. At that point, they're not sharing feelings, they're sharing thought. And I think that's the misnomer. I don't think when we're being asked what our feelings are, we're being asked for feelings, because feelings is like, let's say I've got a cat. I'm holding a cat. I don't want to hold a cat. And you're holding a cat as well. And I'm like, Lewis, here's my cat. And you're like, I don't want your cat. I already have a cat. Keep your cat. The cat is emotions, right?
Okay.
Thought
I was
is
waiting for that
thought
connection.
is, Lewis, I have a cat.
Ah.
May I hand this cat to you?
Yeah.
Right. And so for men to say things like no one cares about our feelings, no one cares about how we feel. I don't know that anyone cares about anyone's feelings until they need to. Just let me just ask, do you think what I just said is fair? Unless unless people are invested.
I think it's contextual.
Contextual. It's contextual, all right?
Okay.
So if you're in a relationship, you do care about someone's feelings and they do care about yours. It matters to a greater degree.
I think it gets back to enlightened self-interest.
Right.
Right. Most of us, whether we like to admit or not, we're pretty self-centered in the sense that most of the time we're thinking about ourselves.
Yeah.
And we are reacting to whatever life's bringing to us based on what our perspective is, largely subconscious, that we're not aware of. You know, all the things we've ever done, what's worked for us, what hasn't, those all sort of shape our almost knee-jerk response to whatever life brings to us. So if I'm in a relationship and there's a challenge, you know, it's less about masculine and feminine and more about your style. It's kind of like, remember government class, you know, all these different forms of government. One of them was called laissez-faire, which was sort of easy as it goes. You know, well, unfortunately, that translates into avoidance dynamics.
I see.
Let's just not have that conversation because I can't stand you attacking me.
Yeah.
And I can't run away fast enough. And that's really embarrassing. So let's just not go there at all.
Yeah.
Well, I have it on good authority and from personal experience that avoidance as a strategy in life really doesn't work. And one of the biggest things that I think men and women avoid is getting in touch with what's really going on. What are they really afraid of? What do they really want? In fact, not they, we. What are we afraid of? What are we really wrong? You know, in any given dynamic, a relationship, a business, whatever may be going on that you care about, where are you in terms of really being present and being your best self? And more importantly, in the energy to this new moon in Pisces, from a sort of a devotion to your highest and best, are you really moving in that direction?
Yeah.
Or are you sort of just sticking with the status quo? There's a lot of times that we just want to be safe.
Yeah.
You know, and that's that ego dynamic. And unfortunately, I think men often, from an emotional perspective, want to be safe more than women do.
Yeah.
Women have been trained culturally to be a little more expressive, you know, and not just in terms of them raising children, but just in terms of how they communicate. Men, you know, they you talk about the Eastern idea of saving face.
Mm.
You know, I think men fall prey to that a bit more than women in general.
Yeah.
And we have more of this idea we should be a certain way, you know.
So many responses. Then I forgot what I was about to say, so I'll just go from there because this thing about safety and security,
Mhm.
of course, it plays. eh, I think we're well past talking about gender here now, but
Right.
let's maybe just keep with the male and the female,
Okay.
because the female to be safe feel safe is tremendously important. Obviously, physically safe,
Right.
obviously
Right.
physically safe, but emotionally safe.
Yeah.
I don't think men understand the depth of how important that is for women.
I think that's probably fair. And in part because they don't understand their own feelings many of the time.
And exactly.
I mean, it's hard for me to understand where you are with respect to something when I don't understand where I am with respect to it.
Are you familiar with the concept of staying in one's own frame?
I think so.
Right.
Talk to me about what you
Okay.
think it means.
So this. All right. To stay in one's own frame. This is how I see it. And I could almost draw it. Let's say I could draw like a diamond shape.
Okay.
That's the general shape of your field as you usually are.
Okay.
Now, I could come around you and have a conversation, and the shape of that will change a little bit because you have a shape. But I keep my shape because in a conversation like this, I need to have my expressive essence. So if I'm in a relationship, what men tend to do is lose themselves in that relationship,
Okay.
right? Which I could almost equate to being a shape too. So let's say mine is a diamond shape and the female's shape is an oval. It's not that simple, but let's just say it was.
Right.
My shape would almost become an oval if I was to lose my frame.
Right.
And in that is my personality, my needs, my priorities, my values, and so on, as I take on someone else's.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I think about staying in one's own frame, you're holding that, and I think it can flex. I think it can amend and adjust as the others does as well, and takes on some of your characteristics. Is this making sense?
It is. I think it is a good time to sort of talk about the nature of relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as I understand it, there's three basic types.
Mm-hmm.
And this isn't just male, female. This is just in general. You can have a dependent relationship
Yeah.
where one person is dependent on another in whatever sense. You can have an independent relationship where you're sort of standing on your own, you're responsible for yourself, you take care of the day-to-day life, as well as the larger picture. You're sort of driving your own bus. Then there's the opportunity for interdependence. Imagine if somehow you took two people in two buses and they're both doing their own thing, but they look across at each other as they're driving down the road and they realize, if we work together, we're in our own position of strength, but if we work together, we could get a synergy effect. We could get the 1 + 1 = 3.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the irony is we can't do that on the inside until we see it modeled for us on the outside. Okay.
Yeah.
In a
I
very simple,
think so.
in a very simple sense, one of the reasons that we're in 3D reality, that we have five senses, that from most people's perspective, reality is from the outside in. Why is that? Because in that sort of linearity, in that appearance, in that flow, in that change dynamic, that's where we can see what's working, what's not working. And then at some point, we internalize it. Now, it was always internal.
Yeah.
But I think by externalizing it, you can see it. You can now touch it.
So where I'm having trouble here is I get you, totally get you. To see it modeled, someone had to internalize it first.
So here's the irony.
Right.
Is there really a difference between inside and outside?
There's a difference.
Is there?
There's a distinction. I'm going there. There is. There is. But no, go on.
Okay. So part of the challenge here, let's get back to male, female in a broader sense. If in a very general way, masculine is logical, structure, dynamic, feminine is softer, more receptive, more intuitive. It's really in the balance and in working with both energies that we're going to connect to and be our best self, our whole self. The more we can do that for ourselves, the more we can bring that to all our relationships, personal, business, global, community, whatever level. All right. At the same time, because most people are reactive in the sense that they believe that life is lived from the outside in. My job is just to react to life. They're not realizing they're in co-creative mode 24/7. It's really hard for people to get out of their cultural model,
Right.
their frame of reference when they were little.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
part of I love your take on this.
Yeah.
When you think about therapy,
Yeah.
part of the power of therapy is not just to raise into consciousness and do whatever that issue was, but just recognize, wait a minute, I have this whole set of tapes that basically are all my frames of reference for what's important, what's not, how to do stuff, how not to do stuff, what's real, what's not, that may or may not actually be quote unquote true in my current consciousness. And yet they are driving the bus. Part of my job, or my opportunity at least, is to rewrite my program.
Yes.
And
Yes.
part of what we can rewrite is our understanding of the male and the female and how they can balance and work with each other internally, externally in a new way. Now, if you think about one, create a new world where people are equally valued, loved,
Yeah.
honored, it starts by how do we honor and value ourselves? And then what do we see and model in the people that are closest to us?
Right.
What do you think about that?
Well, I go to community, and someone said to me once, community is either going to raise you up or pull you down.
Okay.
So community, that's a very amorphous word. I'm talking, you could have a community in your household,
Right.
of your family or your spouse, your neighborhood, your work community, your religion, your nationality,
Mm.
your profession, and so on. But I think family is the common one, and it's it's paradoxical because your family, your closest, the ones you cannot BS, right? Without even wanting to, they want to keep the version of you that they know.
Right.
And the trouble with that is we're always growing, we're always changing, we're always evolving. And that train's never going to slow down or stop. And sometimes, just because I've done it, right, I've done it, sometimes we have to step away.
Right.
With the intention and hope, maybe, that we return greater, newer, improved, happier to support what we originally left and return with something to bring back. Now, that little sentence that I just said took me 17 years and hurt a lot of people.
Mhm.
And you probably would say, did you hurt people, or did they have the experience that they needed to have? But
And can it be both?
but so anyone that's in your immediate vicinity, and I've, as it were, parentheses, lived in several different communities over the years, and with who I've known, and so on. So you got people reflecting you back to you. You got people bringing the greater you, capital U, but in bold capitals, you out of you. And that, I believe, goes well beyond gender. Maybe even stepping into karma and things like that, which maybe this isn't the day for. So let's keep in our lane here. Um, and so if I go back to something I was saying earlier about how important it is for us to choose the quality of our expressive essence.
Mhm.
I'm not talking about divine feminine, divine masculine. I'm talking about the human nature, human feminine quality, the human masculine quality, and how that plays with its plays around itself. Okay,
Okay.
I think that has its own social dynamic. Where do I need to be? With who? When? Why? For how long? How regularly?
The question, given that we have to do that every day with every exchange we have, what do you think people can do, keeping it at the mortal level, if you will?
Sure.
What do you think people can do to have a more healthy, open, relaxed sort of experience of their own masculine, feminine, particularly as they're dancing with others? Because as you said, we're always mirroring each other,
Yeah.
for better or worse.
How do you have an experience of the masculine oneself, right?
Masculine, feminine.
masculine and
Yeah,
feminine.
the balance within,
Right.
so you can express the balance without.
Okay, so a question to help me answer this question. What am I right now? Am I male or female in terms of or does it matter? Because I think it matters.
Okay.
Or I
The
answer.
the aspect of what you're aware of consciously
Right.
may move around on the continuum. The energetic reality is you're forever both. It's a question
Sure.
of what do you want to connect to? What do you want to express? What's your default? Like you said, that androgynous test, you show up as 80% feminine. Part of that is learned. Part of that's genetic.
Well, this is very important because if I look at the male and the female, which we just got two of them here together, they're basically 80% the same thing. If you looked at all of the body systems,
Right.
right, you basically got 80% the same thing and 20%, give or take, difference.
Okay.
Right? Reproductive system, bone
Right.
density, and everything. You with me so far?
I think so.
Right. So if you look at what the physical difference between a male and a female is, we're 20% different.
Okay.
So then what's in that 20%? And I'm past the physical conversation now.
Okay.
If I walk in the world as a male, if I walk in the world as a female, there's a different experience.
Yes.
I walk in the world as a female. What do the Taoists say? The Taoists say the female is exhibitionistic. They say the male is voyeuristic. Have you heard that before?
No, I have not.
Okay, as in it's and this is ancient, right? It's ancient, as in the female is observed, and the male observes.
Interesting.
Right. So let's get out the gate with that.
Okay.
Right. This is not that I like it. I don't like it. But we're still at the tail end of patriarchal expression in the world. And so if I walk into the room and I open my mouth and I've just got a deeper voice than a female, I'm going to be listened to more. I don't like that. I'm not maybe saying anything useful. You're like, of course you're not, Joshua. But can you imagine walking in the world and just because of the pitch and tone of your voice, a different value is placed on it? That's in that 20%.
Okay. Not sure I agree with that. The reason being, we have a set of expectations, sort of role norms in terms of what a man should be like,
Yeah.
what a woman should be like. And it's different culture to culture.
Yeah.
Whether it's racial,
Right.
whether it's gender really doesn't get it. There's so many words, but the point is, talk about your communities. We have these different communities and they have their own frame of reference about what's expected, what's normal, what's okay, what's not. And that I think goes beyond your 20%. That sort of becomes almost all consuming. I suspect we all know people that have been in a relationship and one person, be they male or female, totally overpowers the other.
Yes.
Now, you talked about men sort of allowing themselves to be shaped by the women. Well, it's often just the
Yes,
opposite.
yes,
The
you're
women
right.
just give their power away,
Right.
and they just sort of follow blindly.
Yes.
And then later on, at some point, they realize, wow, this isn't what I want. This isn't who I am.
Yeah.
And that recognition can occur on either side at any time. So that, I think, makes us, once again, a lot more alike than we think. But I definitely agree with you that the experience of the average woman, the average man, on almost any part of the planet is profoundly different.
Yeah.
The good news is that's more about the outer frame of reference that's imposed and accepted, as opposed to the inner sort of vibrational reality of what we're capable of. I mean, I think, all right, let me go cosmic again for a minute. When you think about the angels,
Yeah.
all right, the angelic realm, energetically, they're not male or female.
Mhm.
But they connect to both and they'll present however they need to.
Mm.
So if you think about Archangel Michael, I mean, we're talking, flaming sword, divine power. That's about as masculine as it gets. And then I shift to beloved Jophiel, who, at least from my vantage point, presents as the representative of the divine feminine. Very, very gentle, very wise, and yet incredibly powerful. it's for me very empowering to recognize I can connect to either of those
Yeah.
and be either of those at will.
Yeah.
Don't you think that's something that if we knew that for ourselves as a man and a woman, whether our genetic code said that that could be very helpful?
I absolutely do. You've got me thinking about not just angels, but what happens in the energy field when we do that.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens in the energy field when we do that is we get I'm going to speak in numbers, and correct me as you wish. We get above the fourth dimensional wash and mess,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we get, let's just say, fifth dimensional.
Okay.
What's numbers at this point? But if I say we get to a more unified field because
Okay.
we get elevated, right?
Okay.
And does it help me sometimes to think about Archangel Michael? Does it help me sometimes to work with that quality of energy? Yeah, it does. When I've gone and done space clearings in offices and homes, and
Yeah.
I've walked in and I've thought, I am so grateful right now that I can't see what's in here, because I would run. And so in that context, I would call a masculine energy like the Archangel Michael, which for me feels like the size of a skyscraper behind me.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, if I could see what's in here, I would be terrified. But everything that's in here was terrified of that.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
And that helps me walk in less fear, therefore more love, therefore more myself. Okay.
Excellent.
So that's that path.
Okay.
So I'll take a different name. Raphael.
Okay.
Because I've seen a little more of the male masculine representation of Raphael,
Yes.
but certainly not exclusively.
Okay.
And you might say, well, the feminine would be Raffaella, whatever. But no, I've seen equally as many of the feminine version of that's called Raphael.
Okay.
And so that's because if you'd said, well, instead of Jophiel, because Jophiel's an androgynous one for me. If instead of that you'd said, well, what about Mother Mary? What about Lady Venus? What about Kuan Yin? Well, I'm thinking softer now.
Right.
I'm thinking softer. I'm thinking, I'm not, now going back to what you said about following intuition by having courage to do so.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I chose to connect with one of those energies, courage isn't necessarily what I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm.
I might be looking for a different quality of courage, like acceptance,
Mm-hmm.
allowing, because that's letting myself feel something I don't want to feel. So that's all to say, which road do I want to go? To feel the way I want to feel.
Isn't it situational?
It entirely is.
I mean, all right. So I've heard a rumor that you do a few things with sound healing.
You shouldn't listen to people.
Yeah. So let's say you have a set of singing bowls tuned to different chakras, different frequencies. You have a set of tuning forks. Again, however they're configured. And you have, patient X that shows up and they're on your table and they have some problems they present. There are some universal energies that will help people all the time. Right? And then there's a recognition that this particular car has a particular type of engine, has a particular type of issue, and I'm going to work with what is appropriate for that.
Yeah.
Okay. At all points, though, it's important to have as much of an understanding of your whole toolbox as possible. Because the more tools you have, the more sort of variability you can encounter, understand, and modify toward the good, since that's probably why the person showed up.
Right.
Right. So why don't we think of masculine and feminine like that too? Instead of either or, you even kind of like painting, it's not just one hue or another. You can start to blend. Yeah. What would happen if you took the power and the courage that you attribute to Archangel Michael and the receptivity and compassion you tune or associate with Lady Kuan Yin, and you wove them together? What would you have?
Dude, I'm male. I can't do two things at once.
Now, come on now. You missed being a female in this lifetime by this much. If one chromosome pair switched the other way, I'd be talking to a different person.
And yet I missed.
Well,
well, to answer that, because I'm still on this track. What I know you're saying they're not polarities, but I'm gonna just argue.
They're different.
I'm gonna fight for my mediocrity here and say they are polarities, rather like wet and dry, hot and cold. In that respect, it's fine, but I'm saying this because I know people feel and think this.
Okay,
So even though I'm wrong, let me go on.
go for it.
You say, why can't I at the same time have the certain qualities we attribute to the Archangel Michael or the Divine Masculine, and certain qualities we attribute to the Divine Feminine? I think we can't have that at the same time because we are currently in time. The human experience is in time and it's in space.
Mm-hmm.
Of course it isn't. We get our invisible self, our intangible, our etheric self. It's not existing in time. But to a degree, we are. We're in time right now. We're going to be here for just under 90 minutes and we're going to stop. So in respect, we are in time.
Yes.
And we are not in time. And you just said, well, why can't we do this and this at the same time?
Mm-hmm.
My answer to that is because we've got this organ inside our head that helps us make decisions, and we can make one decision at a time.
Okay.
Even though trillions of things are happening at the same time, the will can only do one thing at a time.
Okay. Are you open to
No.
alternative?
No. I'm male. No, I'm joking. Of course not. Please.
All right. So for whoever's listening to this, let me just do a what if. Not the Marvel version. All kinds of explosions.
You haven't even seen that. Have you seen it yet?
No, but I've read the original comics for years and years and years. And that really is, all the movies, the books came before.
Yes, I'm aware of that.
So it's all about alternative realities.
Please, yes. We can continue that conversation later.
And, we could talk about how the Marvel characters personify different aspects of our collective psyche.
Next time.
Okay, fair enough. So,
all right, maybe we round off with that.
No,
in fact, I can.
Can you?
I can. But do you want to finish your point first?
Let me finish this up. All right. So the question before us is, if we want to take the best of the feminine, the best of the masculine, weave them together, use them at the same point in time. In this experience, as a human being walking around on two legs, how do I do that? How could I do that? One magic word: intention. Okay. I think if we, at the level of intent, without having to logically understand it, but perhaps intuitionally accepting it, if we connect to this idea that I am a whole being, I am the light, in which masculine and feminine dance and play and sing, and it's great. All right. Even though in my logical mind, I might identify this or that, either in terms of what I am or how I'm responding to a given situation. Because sometimes you want that strength of that masculine. But then wait a minute, if you challenge a mother bear when her cubs are being threatened, isn't that stronger than the male could ever be? So maybe that's not quite as clear cut as we thought. Or wait a minute, what about compassion? You think of compassion as a feminine trait, and yet compassion is the main thing the Buddha always talks about. Compassion, detachment, awareness, understanding. So what I present to you is this notion that those two roles, those two energies aren't quite as opposite as you think. And therefore, through intention, we can be compassionate in our strength. We can be courageous in our love. We can start to be both at the same time without having to get into the weeds about, what am I doing again? We can start to connect to our whole self just because we want to.
Just we want to. Yes.
Because we want to.
Yes.
That's my point.
I agree entirely. You elevated that perfectly. Absolutely. Intention. In there. And then you were just too interesting for my brain. When this just came. Landed in my head. Are you familiar? I'm sure you've heard it. Are you familiar with the distinction between be, do, have versus do, have, be?
Haven't heard that put that way, but I think I
Okay.
I
So
talk about that a little more.
The traditional way that people have done things for centuries, millennia, is do, have, be, right? I take an action, I get something, I feel a certain way,
Okay.
right? And
Okay.
that keeps you in a cycle,
Right.
because you then after a point don't feel a certain way and have to go back to the start. I do something, get something, feel a certain way.
Okay.
So what we're encouraged to do, particularly New Paradigm, is get into the way that you want to feel, do something, get something. And so that way you're already sourcing how you want to feel. You're not using something externally to activate that.
Yeah.
And so you can either sustain it for longer or recreate it easier. But you're not living from the outside in.
Yeah. And that lines up really well with just sort of basic manifestation 101.
Yes. Yes.
You know, when you have an idea of something that you quote unquote want, whether it's tangible like a new car or something intangible like a new opportunity to do something, you know, when we can perceive that mentally, and yet when we can feel it, you know,
Yeah.
what's it going to be like when you have that, when you're experiencing that, when you're in the middle of whatever it is you want? Because from spirit's perspective, as you said earlier, spirit's not in time.
Yeah.
Even though Lewis Perry, Joshua Nasha are. So from the perspective of what we're co-creating, if we can connect to sort of the highest, most beautiful feeling associated with whatever we're going to do and start training with that, it makes sense that what you'd wind up with would be at least much more in alignment with your original intent.
Right. Right. So going back to what you were just talking about of intention or this, then that, right?
Right.
Probably 15, 16 years ago, I first came across be, do, have as a suggested way to live, create, manifest,
Right.
without arguing the toss between the two. And so what was said at the time is get into the way you want to feel. So what would I do? I go sit down and I have all these crazy thoughts and busy and couldn't focus. I'm like, if this is being, then screw this, right? What's
Too hard.
It is too hard. And it took me a while to realize, okay, I want to go the be, do, have route,
Mm-hmm.
but I actually have to do something within my field or support my essence in a certain way to open up, to get into that beingness before I can start the process.
Okay.
Which is very different to I'll get a car and then I'll be happy.
Right.
And it might sound really basic what I've just said there, but it took me years to figure that out.
The question.
Yeah.
That sort of paradigm that's more from the inside out.
Mm-hmm.
How does that track to the dynamics of masculine and feminine? You know, just in a broad sense, which of the two polarities, if they were polarities, which they're not, but if they were,
Mm-hmm.
which of those two groups has an easier time starting with the B, leading with that?
Well, if you're asking male or female,
Mm-hmm.
then I would say the female.
Okay.
Female is the females that certainly I've met are more used to being with their feelings,
okay,
than males are. And I have to use the expressions females and males as opposed to men and women,
right?
because if I talk about a man or a woman, you can have a good man or a bad man. You can have people say good. No, the word good is a judgment.
Right.
That's not there's too much variation in that.
Right.
That's why I go there. And I accept that as the last 30 years have gone on, females have started to take on masculine, I say masculine, not masculine characteristics.
Mm-hmm.
Earning, I wish females were earning what males were earning, but it's not the case across the board. But it's gotten closer. Would you agree?
Yeah, I know of a relative of a friend who has just gotten a big raise, and it's because this person is outperforming everyone around them, and just going like gangbusters. And again, the ability of anyone, masculine or feminine, to connect to and express their excellence, particularly when they figure out who they are. That's a whole nother conversation. Who are we to begin with much less how do we figure it out.
Okay,
You know? But
that's for another day.
That's another.
Yeah, we should write that down. Write that down. Let me check the time. We're getting near time.
Okay.
Getting near time. All right. So you want to know who I think is the most powerful character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe? If I go back to Endgame time,
Okay.
right? Pepper Potts.
All right. Please, for those that don't know, give a sentence about who she is in that larger
All right.
scheme.
All right. Pepper Potts is the wife by the end of it.
Right.
Wife of Tony Stark.
Right.
All right. So if we go to the 5 years later after the snap,
Right.
and they're sitting chatting, and Tony invents time travel. Tony
Okay.
Stark invents time travel.
Okay.
Right. And they having the conversation. He's like, "Shall I just throw it in the lake?" She is the one that could have said yes, but she doesn't. She says no. And that's what saves the entire universe. More than Thanos, more than Captain Marvel. It's Pepper Potts' choice that saves the universe. And that is the power of the feminine.
So you're saying that at the end of the day, feminine wisdom to navigate our car on the highest and best road is really one of the most important qualities to cultivate in ourselves.
Yes. Yes.
I think that's fair.
Yes. That's exactly what I think. Shall we call it a day there?
Yeah. Well, let's do a summary piece.
Yeah.
So if you had to just talk to people in general, whatever their gender, whatever their masculine and feminine orientation, what would you say to encourage people to see each other as equally valuable, beautiful beings, and to cultivate that awareness, no matter what the cultural model,
Right.
the sort of perspective of the current political flavor? How would you sort of get to the core to help people see each other as equally amazing and beautiful, no matter what their role, what their masculine and feminine status is?
I would say stop looking at what you can see.
Okay.
That's the only place you're going to see and understand someone's value. Start listening to them and start watching what they actually do. Because if I'm using my eyes, then yes, okay, 80% of the information I get is coming through my eyes. There's a lot of distortion, a lot of perception that goes into that. You want to get a sense of who someone actually is. You're feeling them. You see what they do consistently, but you don't use your eyes.
Right. At the end of the day, don't you use your heart?
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. This has been very enjoyable. Look forward to whatever spirit throws our way next.
Indeed.